You're listening to Reforming the Ozarks, a podcast serving the local church in Southwest Missouri with biblical teaching and Reformed theology. To learn more about our churches, please visit ctkjoplin.com and gospelsgf.org.
All right, welcome back to another episode of Reforming the Ozarks. On this episode, we are going to continue our series in the liturgy and the elements of worship, and we're going to talk about singing. And to do that, we have a special guest with us. Dustin and I have Aaron Rains, who's associate pastor down at Church Bentonville. And he'll be a familiar face to you guys at Christ the King and also to Gospel Fellowship. He's been there at least once, I believe, with his wife. But I'll kick it over to Aaron, though. And Aaron, I'll let you introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your family and your ministry down in Bentonville.
All right. Thanks, guys, for having me on to talk about one of my favorite topics and something that I've been involved in the church for a long time. And it's something that's really important to me. So I am married to Bonnie, who is my junior high sweetheart. We've known each other for a very long time. We've been married 19 years now. Just celebrated our anniversary on New Year's Eve. We have 3 girls. They are... Let me think, because we're in the middle of birthday season. They are currently 12. Today is our middle child's 11th birthday.
Happy birthday.
So we started with donuts and presents this morning.
Yes.
And our youngest is 9. I'm at Christ Church Bentonville. I'm down in the true and better Ozarks, south of the Missouri border, down here in Arkansas. So I had to represent. I've even got my Arkansas Grand Canyon, Scenic Point, Arkansas mug. So I was very prepared today, coming in hot. Grew up here in Arkansas, and so we've moved away a couple times and always ended up finding our way back here and love it here. Christ Church planted in September of 2018. We were sent by Trinity Grace and Rogers, sent a bunch of us just north of Rogers to come and to plant. And Chris Taylor is our planting pastor, and he is our senior pastor still. And when he was planting, he took me out to lunch. I had just come under care of Presbytery, and he said, I want you to come and do this with me. And then he said, have you ever thought through, if you could put together a liturgy for a worship service, you ever thought through what it would look like? And I said, do I have a spreadsheet that I have saved that already outlines if I put together my ideal service? As a matter of fact, I do. So when we planted, my internship was basically those first couple years there with the church. From the beginning of the church, my responsibilities included planning the liturgy and leading the music, playing guitar and singing. We particularized in 2020, and that's a wild story if you think about everything that's going on for a church to become self-sufficient and on its own in the middle of all that. That's a different story for a different time.
Praise the Lord.
Yes, it was awesome. But when we particularized, I was elected as a ruling elder. So I was a ruling elder for a couple years, was finishing up seminary, and then in February of 2023, finished seminary, passed my exams, was ordained as a teaching elder, and took the demotion from ruling elder to teaching elder. It's called as the associate pastor. So it's been almost 2 years, but it's been a joy to be there from the beginning. And we just had our annual congregational meeting where we kind of go over what happened last year, what we are looking forward to this year, and kind of had an update. And it's been wonderful how the Lord has blessed us over these past 6.5 years. Hard to believe it's been that long. So we meet downtown Bentonville, and we have grown primarily through having babies all the time. And that's a lot of fun just to have kids running around everywhere. And it makes for a very joyful worship service to have all those kids there with us every week.
Yeah. Well, it's awesome to have you here with us, Aaron. We are thankful for you and for all that you've done for not just everything you're doing in your church and how you've helped our churches, but also just the work you do in Presbytery as the stated clerk there. So yeah, Aaron, awesome guy. If you're just listening to this, you're not watching it. So he's rocking the Arkansas hoodie with the Ozark hat. So he is representing. He's making a statement, and the mug too. So but we're thankful to have you. So Aaron, you do a lot of work with your church. You mentioned it in your introduction that you do a lot of, or you started right away in the internship doing a lot of work putting the liturgy together. So we've been going through this series on the different elements of our worship services, and we've talked about the call to worship. We've talked about prayers in general and the prayer of invocation that usually begins our services. At that point, we're usually now singing one or two hymns or songs, and we wanted to talk to you. You've led music at our service multiple times. You sing, you play guitar. Bonnie sings, your wife. So we want to talk about that element of singing. So if you could just give us what is the element behind our singing? What is it? Why is it so important?
Yeah, so singing is a command in Scripture, and the Scriptures are replete with calls to sing in worship. And there are different aspects of why we sing and how we sing, and there are multiple reasons behind singing. But God's people have always been a singing people. You think back to when they crossed the Red Sea, and they were delivered in that great deliverance of the Old Testament, that one event of salvation for God's people that kind of defines the rest of the Old Testament. The very first thing they do on the shores on the other side is Moses writes a song, and Miriam and the women join in and they sing along. So the response to God's grace to us has always been to sing. We have a whole book of Psalms that talks about the reasons to sing and what we should be singing about. The New Testament, Jesus and his disciples at the Last Supper, they close with a hymn before they walk out. And we have instructions in the epistles for singing. And then you get to Revelation and you find, what are the people in heaven? What are the saints and the angels doing? They're singing. And interestingly, Revelation tells us they're singing the song of Moses and of the Lamb. So singing is something that God commands, and it's something that God's people have always joyfully joined in with in worship. And it's something that if you think about the things as we talk about a liturgy and we talk about why do we do this, why do we do that, you're not going to get pushback from people that go to church that say, hold on, is singing? That's weird. No, that's just something that the church has always done, and it's never been something that's fallen by the wayside. It is something that we need to be thoughtful about and biblical about, but it's not something that anybody's ever said, oh, we really shouldn't be doing that. Music has always been central to the worship of God's people.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's never, why are we singing? The real debates or discussions or problems that can come up is what kind of music or style or those kinds of things. We haven't really talked about too much. I think we've talked about it a little bit, the distinction between the element and the form. The element is the thing itself, singing, preaching, reading the word, praying. The form is the form that those things take. So what kind of prayers do you pray? What passages do you read? And that's where you get the question of what songs do you sing and how many, and what kind of style or instrumentation do you use? So Aaron, just riff off of that. And maybe when people are coming to one of our services, to a Reformed or Presbyterian church service, it can feel a little bit different. We might not be singing the most popular contemporary songs out there. Why don't we? What are some distinctives of Reformed singing and music and those kinds of things? I know that was just a lot, so take it however you want to.
Okay, so you guys have talked a little bit about the idea of the dialogical principle of worship, where our worship services are structured in such a way that God speaks to his covenant people gathered as one body, and we respond with one voice. And so the emphasis in our worship services is when we are doing anything as a body, we're doing it together. So our focus is going to be on congregational singing. It's going to be, our music is meant for everybody to participate in, joining together our hearts and our voices as one, responding to the Lord. So you hear the call to worship. You have a prayer where one person is praying on behalf of the whole body, and then the whole body gets to join in and respond to that call. And so we are responding back to the Lord. And so our focus when we sing is going to be less on the instrumentation and on any kind of a performance element, but our focus is, how do we get everybody together to get that one voice of the people rising up? And then there's certain principles that we'll think through as we think, what are the best forms that takes, and how do we decide the music we're going to sing to do that? But I think that, at least in my experience, is going to stick out in that our goal is, it should be, and it is in our churches, that when you walk in and the whole church is singing, you want to hear the people singing. The goal isn't to hear all of the instruments overpowering and drowning out because they're beautiful and you have really good musicians. You might have all that, but all of that is there to support the main instrument in singing, which is the voice of the people. So this affects everything that we do, from the way that we design our church buildings to the way that we plan our instruments that help lead us in worship, and how we set up our sound systems, to the types of songs that we pick. All of those considerations should be undergirding that one goal, which is to get the people to sing together. And I think we run into some difficulties, particularly in our culture, because we're not a singing culture anymore. And I've got a whole rant I can go on for that for you if you want me to here in a minute. But if you think about where does music exist? Well, in our culture, it exists all around us, but you're never really in an environment where everybody's singing together, except for maybe at a concert. If you think of, so I'm a soccer fan, so you think of like the English Premier League. Each of those fan groups has chants and songs for their own hometown team. And if you go, or if you watch on TV, you'll hear they're singing the entire time. They have these songs that they sing together. And if they're watching together in the local pub, they're all singing together with the guys on the screen as they're doing that. We don't have that in America. We don't have these things where we have a societal event, a group of people that get together and they break out into song. And so because of that, that's kind of bled over, I think, even into our churches, to where it's not natural for people to sing together. Church might be the only place every single week that we're singing together. And so that's something also that, as we think about how do we get our people to learn and to really enjoy singing together, we actually have an uphill battle to climb. And we should bring, in my opinion, we should be thinking about how we can bring that barrier down for people that aren't used to singing together, so that it becomes natural to them and part of that rhythm, to where it's not off-putting for them and they're able to join in. And then there's specific considerations that I think help us to do that.
Yeah, one of the things I've tried to emphasize at Christ the King, and maybe you guys agree, or maybe you approach it differently. I know it's very, maybe it feels nitpicky, but it's so, in the American church, broadly speaking, it's become very common to refer to the people on stage as the worship team or the worship band or the praise band. And what I hear you saying, Aaron, which I know we all agree with, is the congregation actually is the worship team. And they're the ones that are called to worship and to sing. And so we refer to our volunteers on stage as just the music team, as just another way to try to maybe change the culture or impress upon people that this is not something where we're just passively receiving, but we're actively participating in worship. And these folks are helpfully leading us because, like you said, Aaron, we're not used to just singing all together as a group. And it can be very helpful to have people leading and helping us to do that well. But that's not the end all be all. The end or purpose of it is for the congregation to be singing.
Yeah. So along those lines, a lot of people around here. So we are in Northwest Arkansas. We are still kind of the Bible Belt, but we're moving away from that. But most people here still have familiarity with church. They'll go to church, maybe a couple times a month at minimum. But if you talk to them and you just use the word worship, they're immediately going to think the music. When they think of worship, they're thinking we go and we worship, and then maybe we hear a sermon. Yes. And they don't think of worship holistically like you guys have been talking about. And I think that's another way that we need to be refining our thinking as we're talking to people, is that all of this is worship. Music is one part of that. And all of worship is to be participatory, even to the point of, and this isn't the sermon episode, but even to the point of when we have preaching, that's not passive. We're to be actively listening to God's word being preached. Every part of our worship service is to be participated in by everybody. And so changing our thinking on what worship means, being more holistic, but also just saying all of this is for all of us to be involved in.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dustin, how has that looked like for you guys as you're just, you're starting off under a year now? You're still less than a year of meeting for corporate worship. So, thoughts on that, and what does that look like for you guys?
Sorry, I have a question that I'm brewing up for Aaron. I love what he was saying just a minute ago, and so I was a little bit distracted there. But ways that we have, one of the things actually I said this past Sunday, we're still in Ephesians 2. We've been in Ephesians 2, 1-7 for a long time, and our people have been very, very good to listen and to be active in it. And anyway, I said that I was planning on moving on into 2, 8-10, but I needed just to do a sermon on Ephesians 2, 7. And I said, we need to pause and worship with this passage. That's what we're doing in the sermon time. It's not just the TED Talk where, or I'm getting tips for life or whatever, but worship is singing, worship is sermon and preaching and listening and participating and reading and all those things. One of the things that we'll be excited to have is, as the Lord provides ruling elders for us, then they'll be able to participate in the worship leading. And again, that's not the singing. They can, that's fine, but they will sing, but they may not lead in singing, but worship leading, as in they participate in reading and leading the liturgy. So the call to worship, the prayer of invocation, or the reading of the law, the prayers, and those kinds of things. So they'll be leading in that way. Right now, I'm doing all of that, and I love it. So I don't want to give it away, but it's not the Dustin show. It's not about me. It's about worshiping the Lord. So. Yeah, so that's kind of some things going on right now with worship for us, but yeah.
That reminded me when I was at our old church in Richmond before I moved here, and did my internship there, and I was assistant pastor there, and and they had a rotation of ruling elders and myself and the lead pastor, Dennis Bullock. who we had on the show, which is awesome. Go listen to that episode if you haven't. But we'd rotate who led the worship, and I remember my wife was talking to one of her friends, and she had mentioned to her friend that I was leading worship on Sunday, and her friend told her, "Oh, I didn't know that Levi sang and played guitar."
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what you picture when you think worship leader.
Yeah.
You have a picture of in your head of a guy in a flannel shirt with rolled up jean cuffs, and that looks just like that. Yeah, no, but they all have and maybe I have similar glass, but they're all like the clear. That's like the thing right now is the clear big rimmed glasses.
Yeah, dude.
Yeah. But no, it's very interesting. There's definitely a culture, and our churches have not been unaffected by that. It's something that, like you all were saying, we need to be very intentional about.
Yeah, for sure. Aaron, when you were speaking a minute ago, a question came to mind. So not to put you on the spot, but help us think. Someone who might be listening to this, and this is part of the point of the podcast, is to expose or to broaden the worship horizons of those who are not familiar with Reformed worship. But so you mentioned whenever someone is leading in prayer, maybe in the prayer of invocation, the pastoral prayer, whatever, what that person is doing is using his one voice to pray on behalf of the body. And so there's somewhat of a and help me with a different word that it's just not coming to me. He's kind of praying vicariously. He's the vicar, right? Or he's mediating, for us, but not, we have the one mediator. So I'm struggling to find a word there or a picture. But what's the difference with that and the lead, the worship leader, the singer guy, and the band, doing a performance for us, right? Like they're singing, they're the ones, and they sound really great. The volume's up, the lights are down. I'm having my alone time with God, right? Corporately, which doesn't make any sense. But what's the difference there? Does that question make sense?
Sure. Yeah. Well, one of the major differences I would say is when you read the Psalms and there are commands to sing, they're not in the singular, they're in the plural. The command goes out to everybody there. Hey, this is something for us all to do together.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it goes back to that dialogical principle. So we think about order in worship. We love as Presbyterians to do everything decently and in order. And so we are not likely to think it is proper for everybody to pray out loud at the same time their own prayers. And so if we're going to have a prayer so if we're going to have a prayer lifted up out loud, then either we all need to be praying the same thing out loud, as in praying the Lord's Prayer, which we should do, or we're going to have one person voice that prayer on behalf of everyone, as everyone else lifts their hearts along with, in their minds along with that prayer. But one thing that music does is the way that music is structured, the way a song is structured is it makes it easy for everybody to be on the set. Rhythm is built in. So here is the pace that everybody is offering the same words together. We have words, whether they're up on a screen or printed in a bulletin or in a hymnal, we have words that are set to music so that everybody can join in and say, this is the part that everybody does together. And so the Lord calls all people to worship together, not for one person to represent the entire body in that element of worship. And so that'd be one difference that I would say. And it's just built into the design. We think about what music is, and I'll give you a little bit of my rants. So part of the problem of music in our culture is we have gone from music being a corporate event, wherever it is, whether it was the entertainment after dinner everybody had a piano, or we're in the Ozarks, everybody had their guitars and their banjos and their mandolins and their fiddles. After dinner, sitting on the front porch, what do? You break out the instruments and everybody gets together and sings along.
Oh.
And it was something for everybody to be involved in. That's what music developed as. That was what God gave it to us for. But because we live in the wonderful capitalist culture that we do, the music industry has turned music into a commodity. And that's why everything on the radio sounds the same. That's why everything on Christian radio tries to mimic what's on secular radio, because only about 10 to 15 years behind, is because it's now made for consumption. It's something that's either background noise or it's something for somebody alone in their car to just consume and listen to the experts doing this. And it's good to go and to enjoy someone who is excellent at music. But our culture has completely taken everything corporate out of that. And now our experience and our interaction with music is, this is something I can go to Spotify and it will tell me the things that I will like to listen to based on an algorithm on what I have enjoyed in the past. And it's curated and cultivated specifically for me. And I'm just going to sit here and passively consume it. And so our relationship to music in our culture is different than anything in the history of the world. Music has been around since the dawn of time. I'm convinced they were singing in the garden, Adam and Eve together. But it's only been in the past 50 to 75 years in Western cultures that it has gone from the primary use of music to be something that binds people together and participated in, no matter the environment, whether it's at church or at a sporting event where everybody's singing together, or at home after dinner when before we had TV and radio, when you're just sitting around. And now it's something for me to just take in. And that's what has infiltrated the church and has turned this into, there are people a lot better at music than me. And so I'm going to sit here and I'm going to enjoy that. And that's going to be my experience of worship. And that's not how God designed music for worship. God designed music for worship to be sung by the people.
Man, that's awesome. Yeah, what you just said there. So today's psalm reading for me, Psalm 28 verses 6 and 7. Blessed be the Lord, for he's heard heard the voice of my pleas for mercy. He's my shield, my song. In him, my heart. Blah blah. I'll give him my song. It's not. I'll let them do it for me. Right? It's my song that I'm singing with us. With the corporate body. That's awesome, man. Woo.
Yeah. How can we, and now it's shifting more to maybe the nitty gritties of what do we sing? What music do we sing? Keeping in mind the goal is that we would all be doing this together. So Aaron, when you're picking music, when you're planning things out, how do you pick good music? What are some guidelines and principles that you have in place for the kinds of songs that you guys sing?
Yeah, so when we think about just music in general, I think there are, if you think about what makes a good song, what makes good music, I think there's kind of 4 broad categories that in general apply to music, and then we can think through those categories specifically for a worship service. And the first is objective, right? So there are objective facts to if something is a good song or not. There are objective things that make something beautiful. But specifically when we're thinking about worship, we're thinking about truth. If we're going to be singing to God, we're going to be singing about God, then what we're singing has to be true. We can't be saying things that are false, because then we'll be lying in church. And I keep telling our people at Christ Church, you should never lie, but you should definitely not lie at church. That's the worst time to lie.
That's a good rule. Yeah.
So the first thing is, we shouldn't say anything false. We shouldn't say anything, especially about God and his character and who he is and what he has done for us. It should all be true. And I don't think that's super controversial. But on top of that, if we're going to be singing something in church, we're very limited in our time. We have an hour to an hour and a half worship service once a week, maybe, and maybe 30 minutes of that, maybe 45 is singing. If you get 45 minutes out of the 7 days a week, it not only needs to be true, it needs to be substantial. We need to be singing about things that actually have substance and meaning to them. And so we need to make sure that the things that we sing are something that we want to take away with us and be meditating on. If songs are going to get stuck in our head from church, it ought to have something of meat to it that it's worth meditating on and worth coming back to. If it's going to be something that I wake up on Wednesday morning and I have a song in my head because we sang it together on Sunday, then it should be something worth meditating on that morning as I'm drinking my coffee. So that there's that objective reality of truth. The three things as we think about truth, goodness, and beauty as they go together. It also needs to be good. The song that we sing should be objectively good. It should reflect God's character and his goodness. There is nothing worse than bad music in church because it undermines what we should be experiencing there in the transcendent presence of a perfectly good God who is creative and who has made beautiful things. And so there should be a level of beauty. There should be some musical excellence. There should be more than one note. It shouldn't be overly repetitive. There are some minimum levels of music should have some excellence and express that truth through the form that it takes. So there's like a minimum objective standard of quality in the things that we pick, kind of based on those categories. That's important. I think as we get to the nitty gritty, as you put it, though, maybe the most important is the functionality. Okay, so we have to think about what are we doing in worship? Is the music that we pick serving that function? So as we think about it at Christ Church, the function of our music and everything that we do is twofold. It's to glorify God and to edify his people. If the song doesn't glorify God and it doesn't edify his people, then it is not worth singing in worship. Mm-hmm. And if I can't point to what about this song does those things, then I'm not going to put it in. We're not going to sing it. It might be fine for listening to in my car. It might be fine for singing while I'm doing chores around the house, but it doesn't belong in worship. And then because our goal is to get our people to sing, this is so important of the functionality is they need to be things that our people can sing. Mm-hmm. And so I love hymns. I love pulling out of the Trinity Psalter hymnal, the psalm settings or the hymns that are in there. But I'll be completely honest with you, for a culture that's not used to singing and people that didn't grow up singing these, so many of those tunes are impossible for our people to sing. And it does our people a disservice if we go, well, this is the old tune and it might even be a beautiful and a good tune. But if your people can't sing 4-part harmony and they don't have the vocal range and they're not used to singing in a group to do that, it's not edifying to them. It actually fails that first functionality test. So as we think about the function of it, it has to be singable. It has to be singable for the people in your church. Mm-hmm. You might have a church full of music majors in college and musicians and singers. And so they can sing songs that my church may not be able to sing. And you need to know your people well enough and love them and lead them well enough to say, I'm not going to force them to try to sing something that they can't. We want this to be a joyful experience for them. And so kind of in practical ways, what we've done is we've taken either psalm settings or hymn settings that, okay, here's what it is to this tune in this hymnal or this psalter, but we can't sing that. But it has the same meter as Amazing Grace, or it has the same meter as Come Thou Fount, or some other tune that our people know and can sing and love to sing. Well, let's sing it to that tune, because then we're actually meeting our goal of giving them something to sing. And so I picked this up from Terry Johnson. He's a PCA pastor, and he has a rubric that he runs it through. He says it needs to be, if we're thinking about functionality, it needs to be singable. It needs to be theologically sound. So I kind of covered both of those things. It needs to be theologically mature. And so there needs to be that meat there. So, we teach our children children's songs that are true about God, that give fundamental truths. Those may not actually be proper for Sunday worship, where we need to be developing that more, and we need to be singing the more full reality of who God is and what he has done. And then as a Presbyterian, this is going to maybe ruffle some feathers, but
Perfect.
he says it needs to be, let's do it. He says it needs to be emotionally balanced. And so as Presbyterians, we want to avoid the over-emotionalization that happens with music, and especially modern worship music, where, okay, if I do the dotted eighth delay on my Telecaster playing through my Vox AC30, it's going to be beautiful, and I can manipulate your emotions through that. And we go, okay, that's bad. We don't want to manipulate and force people's emotions. But the reality of what music is that it's a language and an art kind of to itself, and it's good because music expresses emotion. It's not just a declaration of bare truth on a logical level. It incorporates the whole body. It incorporates your emotions. It also, a good song, you're going to find yourself tapping your foot along to it involuntarily, right? Because music is this thing that incorporates our mind, will, and emotions, every part of us. And that's good. In fact, if you read through the Psalms, you get the whole range of emotions. And emotions aren't something to be avoided in worship. They're to be properly expressed to God. That's why we have Psalms of lament, Psalms of praise, Psalms about God's salvation, Psalms of imprecation. Those are all proper in their proper place. And so we don't need to swing the pendulum so far as the stodgy reform guys and say, take emotion out of music altogether. No, that's part of who we are. That's who God has designed us to be. But as we think about the music that we pick, we don't need to be manipulating people's emotions, but we also need the tune and the feel of the song to match the words that we're singing. So nothing is worse than singing a psalm of lament to an upbeat, catchy beat and tune. It doesn't fit. You're not going to sing the blues at a wedding. The blues are awesome and they're great, but it's inappropriate to have that in that environment. In the same way, as we think about that functionality, we have to say, does the way that we're singing these words that may be true and may be important and may communicate those good truths, is the way that we're singing it actually communicating everything that this song needs to do? And then cultural is kind of it is important, but it's maybe the least important of those things. But there's cultural things that we need to take into account. The biggest one, that I think of is, at my congregation, we need to sing in English. We are all English speakers. It would not be appropriate for us to put up a song in Spanish or in Mandarin, because our people don't speak Spanish or Mandarin. They speak English. So if we're going to all sing together, we need to be singing that language. And then there's other factors that I think kind of flow from that. That's the least important of those, but it's still something that we need to take into consideration.
Yeah. Man, that's awesome. Yeah, one of the things that kind of applying some of the things that you're talking about, some of the things that we've done is, this past Sunday we sang Psalm 23 and in the Trinity Psalter.
Which tune?
Well, so for the Trinity Psalter hymnal, there's two options, and I think A is more common, but it's also in common meter, which Amazing Grace, the New Britannia, or called Amazing Grace, whatever, that's in common meter. And so we just sang it to Amazing Grace. It's like that's a little extra easier for our folks. And so kind of one of the things that I like to think through is, if I'm going to have a challenging, a song that's challenging with respect to a new tune, or even, some of the psalms set to singing are easierly worded to word it poorly, to not do what I'm saying. And some of them it's like, okay, this is syllabified a little bit funky. And so anyway, whenever there's a challenging song, for not theologically challenging or whatever, but we want to give some easier ones, some more common, right? When I feel like in the last few Sundays, we've had we've had more like 2 new to us songs and then 1 more common. And so it's like, we're trying to ratchet that back down a little bit. But yeah, our music leader and I were talking just yesterday. It would be wonderful. With the sermon that we have coming up, we want to sing "And Can It Be That I Should Gain," and that's a challenging song. It's one of the more challenging, but still somewhat common, for those of us who've grown up in, or those of y'all who've grown up in church. But it's like, okay, if we do that one, then we need to pick a couple other ones that are, medium to easy, so that most people aren't like, yeah, I didn't really know any of the songs today, So yeah, that's kind of how how we put into practice some of what you're talking about.
Yeah, Dustin. So we're, I saw that you guys sang Psalm 23 to Amazing Grace. It's like, this is awesome. So we're actually going to do that this Sunday as well. So yeah.
Nice. How'd you see that?
Well, you guys live stream your service, and
oh, dude,
yeah,
nice.
So maybe you didn't know. No.
Yeah.
I tune in. Hey, I tune in every once in a while. Come on, I subscribe.
He is the one viewer you guys had.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
No,
yeah.
They get views.
We get like, I think 3 or 4. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I rewatched it, 4 times. No, that's great, and just trying to, especially the Psalms, and none of us here are exclusive Psalms only kind of guys. We don't necessarily need to get into that right now. I'm just looking at the clock. We might not even have time to really get into that. But like you're saying, Aaron, and this is my own mea culpa when I got here too, was taking some of my favorite hymns and just kind of saying, we're going to sing some of these, but they weren't familiar, and some of them were harder, and I needed to not have done that. And not that we could never sing those, but down the road, as we need to maybe work up to that. And the same with lyrics and lyric changes, and sometimes they can be good, sometimes they can be very bad, in my opinion, where you border on saying untruths, like you were talking about, Aaron. We never want to say that. Where was I going with all this? Oh, but we do want to be singing psalms, but a lot of the arrangements are to such unfamiliar tunes. Mm-hmm. Like the last thing we would want is to try to sing psalms that become very burdensome and like not fun. that just sounds like the worst possible outcome. Not that we couldn't learn some of those tunes, but if we're able to sing some arrangements, and there's been a lot of guys that have been doing good work, but one PCA guy, Seth Jernigan, shout out to Seth. He came and did a little concert for us, and he's done some arrangement to psalms and that we continue to sing. Yeah, they're really, really great. So we just sang his arrangement of Psalm 24 the other day, and I can't remember.
Who shall ascend?
Yeah. I can't remember what tune that's to. It's a common tune, but he has some others. He has one psalm set to A Mighty Fortress. Great, So anyway, that's one way that we can try to incorporate, because we should be singing psalms. Not that we can only sing those, but it's certainly things that we should be singing. And one of the ways we could do that is to try to use familiar tunes.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah, the Psalm 32A, I think, in the Trinity Psalter hymnal is to the tune Resignation. No resignations here today, guys. But it is just, I think it's not super common. But oh gosh, just melt your heart. And then this is a plug for Trinity Psalter hymnal, Psalm 103C, Kisi. That is just, I mean, our people have loved that one. Just incredible, you know?
Yeah, so I'll give this one thing about Psalms. We don't want to go too long, but something that I've told our people over and over again. So in Colossians 3, when Paul says, sing psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, and I just ask him, do you know what the Greek word there translated psalms means? It means psalms. And so, while not being an exclusive psalmist, I don't know if that's the right noun or not, it is the reality that we are commanded to sing psalms. And so if we never sing psalms, we don't have to only sing psalms, but if we never sing psalms, we're being disobedient to Scripture. Mm-hmm. And so we need to be thinking about how we can do that best. And it's not just, okay, something else I tell our people. If God tells us to do something, that's a good enough reason to do it, right? But it's not just God said this, so we have to do it. But the Psalms are the best pattern that I've ever come across for worship music, because out of those 150, you get everything you need for worship music. You get declarations of God's authority and power in creation. You get his covenant faithfulness. You get the responses of lament when things are dark. And you get the very words that his own words that you can sing back to him when you're in those places. You get songs of deliverance that come after that. You get the full range of emotions, and it's all true and proper. Yeah. And so we greatly diminish not only the breadth of what we can sing, but a way to teach our people in how to sing if we never sing psalms. So if there's one thing that anybody hears me say from this is figure out a way to sing psalms in your church. It can only do you good to get more of Scripture into your worship service and more into your hearts. And songs get stuck in your head. A lot of us like to talk about memorizing Scripture, and we find it really difficult. You know what a great way to memorize Scripture is? Put it to music where it gets stuck in your head, and you hear a tune, and all of a sudden you start singing God's word in your head. Yep. And that's going to be great for your children. My kids know Psalms, not because we've sat down and memorized them, but because we sing them in church. And so we'll be there, and we'll be reading. This past Sunday, our Old Testament reading was Psalm 19. And as the ruling elder was reading it, my middle child leaned over to her grandma and she said, "Oh, I know this song because we sing it in church." And so please sing Psalms.
A friend of mine said, we may not be Psalms exclusivists where we exclusively sing Psalms, but we ought not be Psalms exclusionists where we exclude all of the Psalms, you know? So yeah, we should be Psalms inclusivist, right?
Yes.
We should include them in our songs. And one of the things that, when we're wrapping up here, one of the things that I want to let our people know, I want to look ahead a little bit as we're reading through the Psalter in our Bible reading. There's some Psalms of lament coming up, and we've already gone through some, but I want to let our people know, hey, in a Sunday or two, we're gonna be singing Psalm X, and it's a Psalm of lament. And so, read through that Psalm ahead of time, prepare your heart to lament and say, God, where are you? Why have you forgotten me? Why are you so far from me? We know those things aren't true. We know cognitively that they're not true, but we don't believe them at times, and it doesn't feel that way. And the Bible gives us, when you feel that way, sing this, right? Psalm 42 and 43, that's what we'll do, right? But preparing our people, because that's so foreign, right? You're supposed to come to church, sing about how great God is, how happy, clappy, smiley everything is. And so, man, that's like, wait, I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to complain, I don't know how to lament to God, but we need to, and we need to do so in the way that God has given us to do so.
And if it was proper for Jesus to take Psalm 22 on his lips on the cross, then it is proper for us to use the Psalms of lament. And this is something else that really cut me to the heart the first time I realized it, is when we sing the Psalms, we're singing them not only with David or whoever wrote them, we're singing them with Jesus.
Yeah.
And because all scripture is about him, we're singing them about Jesus.
Oh.
So we can sing with and about Jesus by using the Psalms at the same time.
Dude, we need to do this again.
So what you're saying is there's literally no downside to singing the Psalms.
As long as you put it to a good tune like Amazing Grace. Right. Don't do Gilligan's Island, even though it fits.
What?
Have you ever seen that? Gilligan's Island is a common meter tune. And so I've seen churches that have sung songs to that. Please don't do that. That would be
in
inappropriate.
Church, not just as a meme, not just as a joke.
Correct.
But, okay.
Correct.
Well, with that, I think that's as good a spot as any to to wrap it up here. But we'll leave it to you all to go and look up Psalm 23 to Gilligan's Island.
Oh my God.
Oh man. Well, yeah, we do need to wrap up. We definitely need to do this again. Aaron, thank you for joining us and talking about music. It was great having you on.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah. We'll have to have you on again sometime soon, even though you did take a jab right away at Missouri. But we do appreciate you being here. And thank you so much for listening, everybody listening to this. Let us know what you thought. Hope this has been helpful to you. And let us know if you think Aaron is right or if you think that Missouri is the true and better Ozarks, which we may or may not think is the case. But thank you so much. We'll plan on seeing you next week. But until then, as always, go to church.
And don't sing to Gilligan's Island.
Yes. Thank you, Dustin. See you guys later.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Reforming the Ozarks. We would love to hear from you. You can reach us at reformingtheozarks@gmail.com. To learn more about our churches, visit ctkjoplin.com and gospelsgf.org. If you would like to partner with us in planting confessional and reformed churches right here in the Ozarks, go to gospelsgf.org and click on Make a Donation.